we spend so much time trying to find the hack or the trick or the shortcut. What's the one thing that's going to get me the most ROI? And you know what we do when we are looking for that one thing? We do nothing.
What you're doing is empowering yourself with not a no and not a never, or I can't. It's, I'm going to do that. It's not the season right now, but I'm going to make it the season.
Yeah.
In X time, right? Calculation there. There's an allowance there, which just opens you up instead of weighing you down.
I'm telling you, if you do that for 10 years in a row and you do stuff like that, that is the one thing you're looking for.
Dinesh, one thing I love about this podcast is the feedback we get from listeners, from guests. It's been really, really eye-opening and deeply inspirational to have this kind of continuous back and forth conversation with people from all over the world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the most humbling things is when a random text or a DM comes in on Instagram where someone says, you know, I listened to the podcast and it's another good podcast, or they compliment the guest. And it's just such an amazing feeling. I can't describe it. And we're so lucky to be able to experience that. And a huge thanks to all the listeners, all the guests, and we can't forget Shannon behind the scenes. Shout out to Shannon. She is a rock star. She's the podcast. She's a one-woman show.
Absolutely. Without Shannon, I think you and I would be having a very different experience of what it was like to host podcasts.
Absolutely.
But you know, one thing that I've noticed, we've been doing this now 2 years, crazy. One thing that I've noticed is that people say to me, well, what's the one thing you would recommend I try? You know, I'm busy. I've got, you know, all these things going on in my life and things are really stressful, but I know that there's room for me to grow. I just know that there's a micro shift that I can make. I just don't know what that is because there's so much out there, right? Everybody has an opinion about everything and you can Google anything. What I just keep getting asked is, what are the one thing you would recommend? And so I thought we would do an episode about that. I thought the listeners would really benefit from maybe the one thing that's working well for you right now, or maybe the one thing that really has made a difference for you foundationally as you got started.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we can take it in a lot of different directions. And when you started asking the question, I had one direction in mind. But then by the time you finished, I thought maybe another direction might make sense. So I'll start with the second direction. And if you're really upset that you didn't get an answer, I'll go back to the first direction, which is a more direct answer to your question.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I think that question about what is the one thing in itself is flawed. I think that we spend so much time trying to find the hack or the trick or the shortcut, and it's baked into that question. Okay, what's the trick? What's the one thing that's going to get me the most ROI? And you know what we do when we are looking for that one thing? We do nothing. One thing turns into nothing, and when we do nothing, we get nothing. Right? We're not owed anything, and we get no progress. So my one thing to try is actually to stop asking that question and to try a bunch of things, right? And not get hung up on this calculation we've talked about, which is the perceived benefit going to outweigh my perceived effort, right? I think that there's a lot of different ways to approach that. It's try a lot of things. Try what speaks to you. Try things that might be outside of your lane. One thing I like to do, and this is not one thing, it's many things, but it's a principle I try to live by, is to do something hard every year, challenge myself in some way that I've not challenged myself. And then a more direct way of answering your question is, rather than talking myself out of opportunities, I try to talk myself into them. So I had recently, a quick example, I was at lunch in August. So just for context, we're in March 2025, and this was in August 2024. So that's 8 months ago, where I was at lunch with a friend/client, and they're like, hey, would you ever go to barbecue school?
Yeah.
I'd never heard such a thing as barbecue school existed.
Mhm.
And I was like, when else am I going to go to barbecue school? And who would I take to barbecue school with me if I ever choose I want to go in the future? So I
Yeah.
said yes. And we made this plan. And I went down to Unadilla, Georgia, to Myron Mixon Barbecue School and cooked an entire hog. And there was lots of reasons. Like, I don't eat beef and it's cold and it's difficult to go. But that was something that I said, would make my 2025 epic. And rather than finding all the reasons to talk myself out of it, I was like, let's make it happen. And I'm telling you, if you do that for 10 years in a row and you do stuff like that, that is the one thing you're looking for, Seema.
That's so wise. It's interesting to me because oftentimes for me, I will tell you the subconscious limiter to any progress that I have want to make, right? Or have made even in the past to just continue to iterate is you're not doing enough. You're
Yeah.
not doing enough. And I know that that's untrue and it's completely subjective and we can decide, we can get coached about it, get therapy about it, whatever else it may be. But I'm deeply aware of this subconscious message that I do not want to allow to kind of continue to take root, right? And kind of be the weed in my garden, if you will. So when I ask that question, it's more, okay, it's oftentimes from a place of overwhelm because it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much I could be doing. And what I loved about your answer was it wasn't the what can I do, but how. This is the how to think about anything and everything that comes my way in life that can really up level my next experience, right? Like
Right.
how you choose to think about those opportunities is really what makes all the difference between whether you do something or not, your experience of that thing. Because you could have
Yeah.
totally gone to barbecue school and been like, this is stupid. I hate it. Everything stinks. There's a lot of insert reason that this was going to fall short of your expectations. But I saw your posts, right? I saw how it seemed like you guys had a great time. And I love that you did that in an effort to do something outside of your comfort zone and get your hands dirty, proverbially and figuratively.
A lot of having a great time is very subjective.
Uh-huh.
So barbecue school is barbecue school.
Yeah.
Barbecue school is never going to change. Whether someone has a good time or not isn't dependent on the barbecue school. It's dependent on how they show up and their expectations. So a lot of times when I go to something or I try something new, I don't have a lot of expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to touch on your point because this actually came up today. So my son is taking Mandarin. He's taken Mandarin in school for 5 years straight. And we're thinking about potentially moving him to a new school where Mandarin is not an emphasis. There's other languages that are emphasis. So, and he's really good at Mandarin. Like if you close your eyes, you think he was a Mandarin speaker.
Oh, wow.
And so we were thinking about promoting that or encouraging it, not let it die by the wayside. So I was looking at tutors, online tutors for Mandarin, once a week, keep him conversational and at least maintain the foundation so we don't lose it.
Mm.
And I found all these tutors online and I was like, maybe I should take a language because I've always wanted to learn Italian. We talked about this.
Yeah.
I'd like to get better at Hindi. I'd like to learn Mandarin. And then Jane's like, well, what about French? You want to learn French? I was like, well, French is pretty cool too. But all of a sudden I had like 5 languages to learn.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay. And I was going down that path of like, well, I'm not doing enough. Very quickly, I could have said, well, there's 5. I don't know which one to pick. I'm not going to do any of it. And I'm going to stick to English. But there's a concept that I learned called the parking lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and a lot of people do this and they do it subconsciously. And those that are aware of it are very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
This is the idea of taking all those different ideas and just slotting them in for time periods in your life. So when I said there's 5 different languages I'd learn, I quickly said in my head, okay, I'm 46 years old, right? I'd like to learn 5 before I die. And that gave me a 30-year time span. And then I looked up how long does it take to get proficient, and it's about 2 years. And I said, okay, I'll start with Hindi because that's the easiest. That'll build some confidence. Then I'll move on to Spanish, which I next know, and then Italian. And then, by the time I'm 60, if I just keep this up, I'll know all my 5 languages. And that way you can step out of the overwhelm and ask yourself, am I doing too much? And I do this all the time. There's stuff that's scheduled for next year. There's stuff that's scheduled for Q4.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really helps to build a very satisfying, fulfilling, epic life. Like I
Yeah.
said, barbecue school was scheduled in August.
Yeah. Because what you're doing is empowering yourself with not a no and
Right.
not a never or I can't. It's I'm going to do that. It's not the season right now, but I'm going to make it the season
Yeah.
in X time, right? And there's a calculation there. There's an allowance there, which just opens you up instead of weighing you down, which it's a skill. It's a skill to learn. And
I
I
appreciate you
love the
saying that.
concept of, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
What about you? What is the one thing that you have done to change your life, or that you would say to someone
Mhm.
that undoubtedly makes your life better?
Well, like you, I had many answers, but I think the single most thing is absolutely in line with what you just said, right? It's not what we do, it's how we do it. I know listeners, you've heard me say this so much. What I'm really, really stepping into, especially as an overachiever, as someone who kind of has this baggage from childhood of do more, step into this next level, whatever that looks like. What has changed my life? The recognition that I can, like you said, Dinesh, I can choose to do something with joy,
Hmm.
or I can choose to do something with fear or judgment or stress, right? I can act out of stress, like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this done. I've just got to grind it out.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that when I am able to remember that barbecue school is just barbecue school, speech writing
Yeah.
class is just speech writing class, creating an episode of the podcast is just that. It's a simple thing. And
Yeah.
I can choose to bring joy to it. It really then eases the pressure and
Hmm.
it allows people to sense that higher vibration honestly, and it makes it fun for everybody else too. If you're there creating, you're not in this weight of I've got to get this done. You're just joyful. Joy is something that we can tap into at any time, at any place. And I know I don't want to get too deep into it, but just that recognition that that is always an option for us and that
Yeah.
I can always choose, even when I'm feeling angry or I am feeling overwhelmed, I can choose to come back and find some sense of joy so that whatever I say, whatever I do can just be done in that intent.
Hmm.
And inevitably the outcome is far better than I would have anticipated otherwise.
That's so good. I love that. It's all about how you show up,
Yeah,
and um, it can't be understated that how you do anything is how you do everything. And
absolutely.
the energy you bring really is a reflection of what you put in and what you get out.
Yeah,
That's it. And it's not the thing. It's not the thing at all. It's how we are with the thing.
absolutely. It is a reflection of how you're really talking to yourself.